These restaurants fed an entire generation. Your parents ate here every Friday night. Every single one of them is gone, and nobody warned you they were leaving. The 1980s were the golden age of American fast food. Not McDonald's, not Burger King. The other ones. The ones with the neon signs and the paper hats and the milkshakes that tasted like they were made by someone who actually cared. The chains that built your childhood and then disappeared without a single goodbye. There is a specific kind of grief that has no name. It is not the grief of losing a person or a relationship. It is quieter than that and stranger. It is the feeling you get when you drive past a strip mall and realize that the restaurant where your father used to take you every Friday after his paycheck cleared, the one with the orange booths and the root beer in the frosted mugs, is now a cell phone store. The building is still there. The parking lot is still there. But the thing that made it mean something is gone, replaced by something that means nothing to anyone, and the world moved on so fast that nobody even held a funeral. The 1980s produced more fast food chains than any other decade in American history. The economy was expanding, the suburbs were growing, the American family was spending more time in cars than ever before, and the interstate highway system had created an entire culture built around the question of where to stop and eat. Entrepreneurs and regional operators opened restaurants at a pace that seems almost incomprehensible today. Distinctive concepts with genuine personalities, specific menus, loyal customer bases, and the kind of local identity that the modern fast food industry, with its algorithmic uniformity and corporate oversight, has almost entirely erased. Most of those chains are gone now. Some collapsed under competition. Some were acquired and absorbed. Some simply ran out of time. And their disappearance left a hole in American food culture that nothing has adequately filled. Burger Chef was one of the first and one of the most beloved. At its peak, Burger Chef operated over 1,200 locations across the United States, making it the second largest hamburger chain in America, behind only McDonald's. It predated McDonald's drive-through windows. It introduced the concept of a kid's meal, complete with a box and a toy, years before McDonald's launched the Happy Meal and got all the credit. The Burger Chef Works Bar, a condiment station where customers could customize their own burgers, was genuinely revolutionary for its era, a direct ancestor of the build-your-own burger culture that chains charge premium prices for today. The food was good, the concept was sound, the locations were profitable. And then, General Foods, a company that understood packaged grocery products but had no instinct for restaurant operations, acquired Burger Chef in 1968 and spent the next decade slowly suffocating it through mismanagement and neglect. By 1982, Hardee's had purchased the remaining locations and converted almost all of them. Burger Chef was erased from the American landscape so thoroughly that most people under 50 have never heard the name. And the people who grew up eating there carry the memory like something slightly painful. The knowledge of a thing that was genuinely good and did not deserve to disappear. Druther's is a name that will stop certain people from Kentucky, Tennessee, and the surrounding South completely cold. It started as a Burger Queen franchise, itself a chain that has been largely forgotten, and was rebranded as Druther's in the early 1980s, an Americanism that means, "I would rather." The name was folksy and warm and completely in keeping with the Southern regional identity the chain cultivated. Druther's was the kind of place where the staff knew your order, where the biscuits were made from scratch in the morning, where families came after church on Sundays and stayed long enough that the lunch rush had already started before they left. It was regional fast food at its most human, unpretentious, consistent, and deeply woven into the social fabric of the communities it served. The chain struggled through the late 1980s as national competitors saturated the southern market. and by the mid-1990s, most locations had been converted to Dairy Queen franchises or closed entirely. What Druthers represented, the idea that a fast food chain could have genuine regional character and community belonging, is almost impossible to find in the industry today. Rack's roast beef occupies a special place in the personal mythology of everyone who grew up in the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic states during the 1980s. Rack's was Arby's before Arby's figured out what it wanted to be. A roast beef sandwich chain with a genuinely interesting menu that included items far more ambitious than the industry standard. At its peak, Rack's operated over 500 locations. The chain experimented with a salad bar concept, offered baked potatoes, and made genuine attempts to position itself as a slightly elevated fast food option for customers who wanted something more interesting than a basic burger. The branding was memorable. A cowboy mascot named Mr. Rax, who appeared in commercials with a confident, slightly absurd energy that kids found hilarious and adults found tolerable. But Rax made the mistake that kills ambitious restaurant concepts with reliable regularity. It could not decide what it was. The menu expanded in too many directions, the identity blurred. When you try to be everything, you become nothing. And by the early 1990s, Rax was contracting rapidly. Today, fewer than 5 locations remain, scattered across Ohio, kept alive by a combination of nostalgia and stubbornness that is, in its own way, admirable. Sandy's was a hamburger chain that operated primarily across the Midwest and represented something that feels genuinely lost in contemporary fast food. A sense of relaxed, unhurried pleasure in an ordinary meal. Sandy's locations were designed to feel comfortable rather than efficient. The menu was straightforward. Burgers, fries, shakes, the fundamental vocabulary of American fast food, executed with consistent quality and without the aggressive, upselling and promotional complexity that chains like McDonald's were beginning to deploy with increasing sophistication. Sandy's was acquired by Hardee's in 1972, but many locations continued operating under their original identity through the late 1970s and into the early 1980s before the conversion was complete. The people who ate at Sandy's as children describe it with the specific warmth reserved for things that were quietly excellent, not flashy, not revolutionary, just reliably good in a way that made ordinary Tuesday evenings feel like something worth looking forward to. Biff Burger was a Florida-born chain that spread across the Southeast in the 1960s and 1970s and maintained a loyal regional following well into the 1980s. The name alone, Biff Burger, carries a kind of cheerful, uncomplicated American confidence that belongs entirely to its era. A time when you could name a restaurant after a sound a comic book character makes getting punched, and nobody thought it was strange. Biff Burger locations had a distinctive visual identity, a specific atmosphere that people who grew up in Florida and Georgia and the Carolinas remember with startling clarity. The particular smell of the fryer, the specific texture of the bun, the way the afternoon light came through the windows in the early evening. These are not grand memories, they are small ones. But small memories, attached to places that no longer exist, have a weight that is entirely disproportionate to their apparent significance. What killed all of these chains is not a single answer, but a combination of forces that converged on the American fast food industry in the late 1980s and early 1990s with devastating effect. The national chains, McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, had spent the decade building supply chains, marketing machines, and real estate portfolios of a scale that regional operators simply could not compete with. A McDonald's could absorb a bad quarter or a poor-performing location without existential consequence. A Druther's or a Rack's could not. National chains also had advertising budgets that allowed them to colonize the American imagination in ways that smaller competitors couldn't touch. When a child in 1985 thought about getting a hamburger, The golden arches appeared in their mind before any other image, not because McDonald's burgers were necessarily better, but because McDonald's had spent billions of dollars making sure that connection was automatic and unbreakable. The real estate dynamics of American retail also played a significant role that rarely gets discussed in these stories. As shopping malls expanded and highway commercial corridors became more competitive and expensive, the cost of operating restaurant locations rose faster than revenues at many regional chains. The national operators, with their larger portfolios and better financing terms, could negotiate leases and build locations at costs that made the economics work. Smaller chains found themselves squeezed between rising costs and the price ceilings imposed by a market where McDonald's was selling burgers for prices that regional operators couldn't match without losing money on every transaction. The margins compressed. The investors became nervous. The expansion plans stalled. And once a fast food chain stops growing in an era defined by growth, it begins dying. There is something important that gets lost when we talk about the disappearance of these chains purely in business terms, in the language of market share and capital structure and competitive positioning. What actually disappeared when Burger Chef closed and Rax contracted and Druther's converted was a set of places where specific human beings had specific experiences that mattered to them. The teenager who got her first job at a Rax in Columbus, Ohio in 1984 and spent 2 years learning how to manage her time and talk to difficult customers and show up even when she didn't feel like it. The family in rural Kentucky that ate at Druther's every Sunday after church for a decade, ordering the same things every time, sitting in the same booth, building the ordinary repetition that family life is actually made of. The father who took his son to Burger Chef to celebrate a good report card and ordered him whatever he wanted off the menu because that was the kind of extravagance the occasion called for. These are not remarkable stories. They are completely ordinary. And that is exactly the point. The fast food chains of the 1980s that no longer exist were the settings of millions of completely ordinary American moments. The kind that don't make it into anyone's memoir, but that form, quietly and cumulatively, the emotional architecture of a life. When those settings disappear, the moments don't disappear with them, but they become untethered. They float without an address. You can remember what happened, but you can no longer drive past the place where it happened. And that loss, quiet, unheroic, easy to dismiss, is real. The neon signs are gone. The orange booths are gone. The frosted mugs and the paper hats and the milkshakes that tasted like someone made them with actual care are gone. What remains is the specific, irreplaceable memory of what it felt like to be young and hungry and sitting in a booth with the people who loved you in a place that no longer exists, eating food that nobody makes anymore. That is what vanished when these chains disappeared. Not just restaurants, not just businesses. Something that, once lost, cannot be rebuilt, no matter how many nostalgia-themed concepts open in their place and charge $15 for a burger that costs 3 times as much and tastes half as good. Some things only exist once. The 1980s fast food chains that are gone forever were one of them, and the people who remember them know, in the specific and private way that only memory allows, exactly what was lost.